Point clear. Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for making your time available at short notice. I'm the Interim Chief Financial Officer. My name is Dion Fredericks, and I'm presenting SAA today. We decided that the most effective way to communicate with you is to give you context in person about our restructuring process and wage negotiation. Let me begin by stating the restructuring process and wage negotiation are separate processes. Both these processes are necessary in the context of the serious challenges currently facing SAA. I would like to stress that our objective is to secure the future of our national airline and work to ensure a bright future for all the company's employees. So let's deal with the restructuring process. Organised labour claim that SAA has not engaged in a consultative process. However, this is not correct, and SAA management full intention is to respect and engage in a full consultative process. We recognise this is our duty as a responsible employer. In terms of the Labour Relations Act, Section 189 consultation process must commence with the issuing of a written notice. On 11 November, SAA issued a written notice to all recognised unions within SAA in line with the LRA. This was done after a SAA scheduled meeting with the unions on the same day. The recognised unions did not attend. Let me repeat that. The recognised unions did not attend. Our representative for employee relations called each of these recognised unions at SAA to inform them that the company has issued a Section 189 and 189A notice. It is important to mention that yesterday the company lodged an application at the CCMA to appoint a senior commissioner who will facilitate these consultations. Now let's get to the wage negotiations. As we've indicated, it's two separate issues. By way of background, there were 9 meetings on wage negotiations since February. In the latter part of the negotiations, SAA leadership made presentations to the unions regarding the liquidity status, financial performance, and progress on the long-term turnaround strategy. We have clearly indicated SAA's difficult financial situation, even though we have made reasonable progress with the implementation of our long-term turnaround strategy. It is our hope that our unions will grasp the full extent of the situation, that's the financial situation we find ourselves in, and engage with us in finding together a constructive way going forward. SAA has created an enabling environment of engagement with all its internal stakeholders, especially the labour unions. We understand that this is a very difficult time for all employees, and we will work with them in this time. Some general comments. SAA's primary goal is to transform into a financially sustainable airline with a renewed focus on driving customer centricity, commercializing the airline, route network profitability, strengthening the commercial and aviation skills, and a series of strategic initiatives that will refocus the organization in driving a profit and loss ethos with strong focus on cost management, revenue, and cost. We promise the following, because it's important in this process. It's a difficult process, so we will do it from our side in this following manner. Consult with the employees who are potentially affected. Consult in good faith, because that's the least we expect. Treat all employees with dignity and respect. Comply with the legislation as set out. Comply with the company's policies, ethics, and values. Communicate with all employees regularly to keep them up to date. Consult and communicate openly and transparently. And lastly, we expect from our employees is active engagement and participation. Let's lastly deal with the threat of industrial action. We need to address the sustained loss-making position that has persisted over the past years. This is why we are leading a restructuring process that seeks to give the airline the future it deserves and establish SAA once again as Africa's leading world-class airline. We note with concern any threats by the unions to consider initiating industrial action. Let me state the reality clearly. Any interruption to our operations endanger the future of our airline, our ability to deliver our strategy, and threatens not one job, but every job in SA as well as the related industries. We are confident that by working together we can obtain the objectives of the strategy. Now is the time, in these difficult times, it's an opportunity to unite together. And however difficult the decisions are for us, so that we can move forward. Our shared responsibility is great, and we can secure a bright future, not only for SAA, but also for the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale. And also let me stress, I did notice that some people were typing quite quickly. We will provide you with a copy. I see how relieved you look, but we will provide you with a copy of the transcript. But we know how skilled you are as well. I wanted to give you the opportunity to obviously illustrate that. Now, as I say, it's very important. We hope that we've given you a clear statement, a clear indication of where we are, but we'd like to facilitate your questions as well. So please, if when you raise a question, if you could first of all let us know your name and which media organisation you're representing, that would be much appreciated. Please.
Hi, Genevieve Quintal from the Business Day. Two questions. First, just a bit of clarity. Did you say the unions, the recognised unions did not attend a meeting yesterday?
Yes.
So then, NUMSA and the SA cabin crew, they said that there was a meeting yesterday where wage negotiations were talked about and not the restructuring, that they heard about the restructuring through the media. Does that mean that those unions are lying to the public? And then secondly, why did SAA settle with air chefs at 7%, and the pilots 5.9%, and then expect cabin crew and customer service agents to get 0%? It seems, I can understand in a way why they have a gripe with that.
Okay, I'm also pleased to say that we have with us today Martin Kemp, who is our acting HR head. So would you like to join us up at the front, please, Martin? And I think that there are elements to that question which are probably best answered by Martin. Do we need to go and stay? Yes, please. Would it help? It would help. Okay, no problem. Okay.
So to start with the last question,
Sorry, can you spell your surname?
K-E-M-P.
Thanks.
Okay, so just to start with the last question is that SAA has got 3 subsidiaries. They're all legal entities of their own. Airchefs is part of the catering industry, not the airline industry, although it provides food to airlines. So there's a catering bargaining council that regulates the wages for the catering industry. So that's why that 7% was awarded to those employees. It actually went to the extent that there was an order issued of compliance because of that issue. In terms of the pilots issue, I mean, they have an agreement that was signed in 2010, which gives them guaranteed increases based on a formula. That agreement is still valid. The company did not went to the pilots and said they cannot afford that increase. The company took it in arbitration. It's the only way you can resolve the matter of that agreement. Company lost the arbitration and was obviously obliged to pay the increase. So it's not in those instances that the company has not tried, but it's very critical to understand that in terms of the subsidiaries, they're separate legal entities and they're not SAA. They are part of the group, but they're part of, like Issues is a good example, being in a different industry. The first question again, Phil?
Yes, the first question was relating to claims that we just made about meetings taking place yesterday, which the unions did not turn up to. And your question was?
They said, so Nomsa a statement and he said there was a meeting yesterday, but the meeting discussed wage negotiations and there was no mention of the restructuring. The unions heard about the restructuring through the media.
So there was 2 meetings yesterday, to my understanding. The one was to discuss wages, and there was one later in the afternoon to discuss the heading of the meeting, because I was requested to be present, so I wanted to personally speak to the trade unions about it. Was read at organizational design, which is how we termed this process in terms of the org design of the organization. So I'm not going to respond if they were honest or not, but that's what the meeting heading was.
So just for clarification, organizational design is effectively a restructuring, just so we're clear on terms.
The recognised unions did not attend that meeting.
They did not attend the meeting.
Please.
We don't know the reasons why.
Name media organisation.
Sorry. Amina Akram, I'm from the SABC
Sorry,
Economics.
you-
Amina Akram,
Amina.
let me go slow. SABC Economics Radio. I just want to find out the numbers that have been thrown, 900, can you just, others are saying 800, whatever. What's the number of the sort of...
So these are indicative numbers. It's all subject to consultation. So that number can be a totally different number after we've gone through the consultation process. The trade unions or employees that's going to be engaged may come up with a number that, come up with solutions that may vary this number. So our aim is to ensure that we minimize any retrenchments. So that's the aim of the process. But, the law prescribes when you issue this notice, you have to put a number in there. And we're following the prescripts of the law.
Sorry, yes, please.
My name is Pedro Matakwa and I'm with Eyewitness News. My question is linked to Genevieve's. Going back to the statements made by the unions, now is SATAL, is NUMSA, is the Cabin Crew Association, is NTM, I believe, yes. They all insist that there was absolutely no consultation. I find that rather bizarre, given the sensitivity and the seriousness of the matter at hand, that there would be absolutely no such communication. Is there a way that SAA can prove that to us, that in fact they did issue a notice to the union ahead of the media statement that was issued to the public?
I mean, I don't know, I can confirm it is a fact, but I mean, let me tell you, I mean, I think when Dion started off and talking to the restructuring process, he made a comment by saying the Labour Relations Act expect the following things. For you, in order to commence your consultations, you have to issue a notice. So as it doesn't prescribe that you have to have a consultation before you issue the notice. The consultation commences after the notice. As management, we arranged the meeting because we just didn't want to send this letter blanketly. So that is what happened yesterday. So the meeting was scheduled to say, organised labour, here is we're issuing you a notice to start consultations. So I think it's important that it must be seen in that context. So the consultations only now commence after that notice has been issued. If people say to you they didn't know about the organizational design, as Philip clarified earlier, they don't know about it, it was part of SAA strategy for 2 years now. There's 5 pillars, and the one is org design. And it was presented to all employees, recognized unions, but we haven't got to a stage where we could determine the number of employees.
So I think to be absolutely clear, the consultative process starts now.
Yeah.
I follow, but can I just please comment? When was that notice issued? Are you able to give us a time and a date?
Yeah, it was, I don't know, I mean, it was yesterday afternoon.
Before, after the media statement?
No, the media statement came after the notice was issued.
In what form were the notices issued?
It was a written notice, and it was followed up with a telephone call.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, please, sir.
Does the Labour
Sorry.
Relations Act,
I
sorry,
think it's-
Kieran Ryan, Moneyweb, does the Labour Relations Act not say as soon as you contemplate retrenchment, you have to engage?
That's correct, yes. That's exactly why we issue it, because we're contemplating, but we have not decided fully. As I said, the outcome can be a total different situation that we have on the table.
So the contemplation started yesterday?
We contemplate. I mean, we came to a decision yesterday that we have to issue a notice because of the situation.
So, yeah. Sir.
Yes, my name is Siphelele Zudla. I'm with Business Report. I'm going to try to tie you to a few numbers or figures. How much does SAA desire to save in this cost-cutting measure in terms of as you're downsizing your headcount? Secondly, with the financial year 2019-20 financial year coming to an end in March, April next year, how soon would you say you wish this process to be complete?
Okay. So I think if you look at the 944 employees, it's estimated. It depends on how the process pans out. It's going to save the company about 700 million rand. So in terms of exactly that, our communications to labour and employees is to have this process finalised by the end of March next year.
And, please.
Yeah, Naropi Wamazana from PNCA. These retrenchments that will be taking place, is it across the board, or does it affect a certain body of the employees?
So let me clarify. This retrenchments are only applicable to SAA, the company. It's not the subsidiaries. So on SAA, the company, it affects all employees across the company.
So from management level?
All the way down. And some departments to a lesser extent and others to a more extent.
Please.
Sorry, I'm going to come back to something you just said now. So, from my understanding, you know, given that you have been discussing these 5 key pillars of how you're going to achieve the turnaround strategy over, you know, the past 2 years, and Labour has admitted that they have been a part of those talks. What they don't agree with is that the company presented to them this now finalized version of the restructuring as it now wishes to carry it out. They claim that in the last meeting you had, in fact, what you had was what they had was a presentation from yourselves, which said, in fact, you were not done. The process was not complete. The restructuring process, that is.
So
again, because it's quite wild. I think you imagine the position we find ourselves in. That
No, but I mean, let me explain. I mean, as the gentleman in front asked is correct. I mean, when you contemplate, you need to consult. So at the stage when they were involved, there was no contemplation because the structures weren't finalized. Now we are contemplating, we have to consult. So the consultations you can't do this consultation outside the legal process. We will be open ourselves to a legal interdict if we do such a thing. You have to do it within a process that's prescribed by law.
Okay, please.
Sorry, I just want to ask something here. When I listened to the unions and during your last briefing here, there was this issue regarding, I mean, everybody is aware that the state capture is ongoing, and there was some money that, you know, unions are claiming that it's not their fault that this money disappeared. Why must the workers be held accountable for whatever happened here? And we haven't had any accountability from SAA or anyone being, you know, anyone returning back this money back to the company.
Okay.
Maybe just.
Dion will take this question.
Thank you for the question, and I think it's a very valid question. There's various investigations that's taking place. Many of these investigations, we can't do something internally. So internally where we could suspend people, or people were fired, or people left on their own accord, then you can't do anything additional. These cases have been given over to the Hawks and the NPA as well. So we continue to make sure that that's being followed up and addressed. So that's one process going on. And and I agree totally with him, that you can't blame us. But the situation that we are and we find ourselves in is currently we're fighting for survival. And ultimately, if we don't do that, if we don't implement the strategy, in July, August, the board got together looking at the current environment and say, we have 10% reduction in prices. Our revenue is under pressure. We need to do more on costs, and we started accelerating. The A350, for example, is an acceleration that we've done. So on all, we've got 5 pillars, and each of those 5 pillars we're busy accelerating. And part of the organizational design is also to make sure that we get the right people in the right positions. And I made previously today, I make the example of a rugby team. You need to have the right coach. You need to have the right backline coach. You need to make sure that you've got the right players, the right number of players. You can't have 20 rugby players on the field. You only need 15. You can only play with 15. You need to make sure that they're in the right positions. And that is what this process is about. If we don't, why did the previous strategies not work? Because we didn't have the right skills, we didn't have the right people, we didn't have the right structures and processes in place. And that's what we're trying to put in place now.
Thank you, Dion. Sorry, this lady who, I'm sorry, I didn't get you fast, I was looking right too often, please.
No problem, that's fine. It's Asha Spickman, I'm with the Business Times. So I just want to clarify again, so you've just stated that, the company is fighting for survival. So in terms of this retrenchment process, what is the critical minimum number of people that actually you need, to take this, to actually take the offer? And if you don't get that amount, what is the backup plan? And then I just wanted to get a sense also just in terms of at this stage your provisioning for this entire retrenchment process and kind of the structure of the packages that you're offering.
Yeah. In terms of the number, as Martin has indicated, there isn't a specific number. We can't tie up a number because we need to have the consultative process at the end of the day. If through the process we don't arrive at an acceptable number where we need, then we need to look at other interventions. What can we do? Consultation with the unions to make sure at least that let's put it out there. Our cost of labor is 24% of your turnover. Add to that your fuel bill is 27% of that. So over 50% of your cost is in those 2 items. And the fuel we can't do much about because it's dependent on the fuel price and the forex. So we need to look at all the other levers to make sure, firstly, that you're competitive. You look from a competitive perspective, we're not competitive. And that's why it's important that we go through the process, and ultimately we want to grow the airline. So if the right people in the right positions, then we can start. We're starting to look at new routes with Philip here that's looking at actually expanding a new routes as well. And as we because the company is actually very sick, and it's like a patient in the hospital. You need now to nurse them back. They're probably not even in high care. And if we don't put all of these levers together, it places the company at significant risk.
Sorry, anybody else who hasn't yet asked a question? I think yes, so.
You said turnover was down 10%. Why is that?
No, I didn't say turnover. If you look from the average price in dollars for average fares from January to May last year compared to this year was 12% down. Then in terms of passengers only increased by 2%. So 12 minus 2 is 10%. So your pricing for the same ticket last year, you're getting 10% less. So we need to make up that with volumes, but you need to make it up with cost savings as well. Because you compete with other airlines that's properly structured, have the right skills, have the right people, and as a result of that, If you don't do it, you will continue to be uncompetitive. And as the shareholders indicated, we can't continue to fund you going forward.
Please.
So obviously the restructuring of the company is not just about cutting jobs. What are the other short-term plans that form a part of the restructuring that the company will be taking on? One in particular that I'm interested to find out about is conversations around the sale of assets to interested parties.
Yeah, we've identified all our non-core assets. We're in the final process in selling our non-core assets. As you would appreciate, as we owned by the state, it will have to go through a process. We are really looking at our fleet, the A350s, for example. Those are much more fuel efficient, maintenance significant better, it's a better product. People is not going to complain when they fly to New York now. We also have revised our procurement processes, making sure there's no middlemen that add 10 or 20 or 30% to the prices. So we're taking that out as well. On the technical side, we've seen we've appointed a new CEO, Adam Foss. He's made significant changes. They've done one of the maintenance events that they have done on a pilot basis. It used to take, I think, around about more than 63 days. They have planned a new process with lean processes, and that will take 35 days. So some of these things are all moving in the right direction. But
Sorry, I missed that. 35 what?
It's 35 days. Used to take 63, now it's taking 35 days. So all of these are moving. However, the current environment and the operating environment's against us. So we need to save every cent at the end of the day. Unfortunately, people spread negative news about SAA significantly. Every time they do that, it costs us 100 million rand. And people need to realize it's not like any other company that you can make wild statements and expect. Because ultimately, if SAA lose, the country actually loses as well.
Obviously, we're very grateful for your interest. I should just point out that we're entering the last 10 minutes of the press conference. So obviously, we'll take a few more questions, but just so you know, we're nearing the end of the press conference. Yes, sir.
Yes, dear. Can you maybe assure the markets and the labor unions that this process is not influenced by perhaps the talks with the private equity partners that are interested in the SAA to say streamline your airline before we buy, or there's no comment on that side?
No. There's two parts. Thanks for the question. There's two parts to it. The one part is we've tested the market and nobody was interested in the sixth channel. So we need to stabilize the company first before an equity partner will be interested. And a process like that doesn't take a year. It will take at least 2 years. That's why we need to utilize the next 2 years. So if our shareholder decide that's the way that they would like to go, that we get top dollar for it.
Sorry, just a quick clarifying question from what Martin said. I know that 944 isn't the absolute number,
Yeah.
but did you say if 944 were to lose their jobs, it would save the company 7 million?
700 million. Yeah, and it's just that's not a number that's penciled in. All that Martin did, if that is what happened, that's the number. So that we don't quote, this is suddenly the number. There's negotiation, consultations that need to take place, and that number would be significantly different.
Okay. The lady at the back.
Thank you. My name is Amo. I'm from Travel News Weekly. Can I have a firm guarantee that as part of the restructuring process and with any costs sustained going forward, that this won't trickle down into the fares for passengers?
Yes, currently in certain areas we're not competitive. If you look at our fares and people say, why is your fare so high? Because our cost structure is so high. And that's what we're partly addressing as well. So if our cost structure is lower, we can provide better fares, we can be better fares, we can have increased sales, higher volumes, create more jobs, and pay it, hopefully a dividend to our shareholders as well.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have a CFO with such a strong commercial focus. I mean, evidently the point is that all of the restructuring, the CCR says, is also about enabling us to be competitive in what is one of the toughest aviation marketplaces in the world. It's straightforward, it's clear. Okay, sorry, there was somebody else, yes.
Yeah, my last question. I find it interesting, actually, that you find yourself in a similar position that Eskom did just last year. when they offered workers a 0% increase and they had the intervention of the shareholder change their minds, should the department, should the Public Enterprise Minister come to yourself to intervene in this particular, I think what is going to be a long drawn out battle between yourself and the unions, would you be willing to reconsider that 0% position?
Look, at the end of the day, it's like if you take yourself in your home situation. If there's R0 in your bank account, you can press the button, pay, but it will just tell you we can't pay. And ultimately, it's about cash flow and funding. If you don't have cash flow and funding, it's difficult to pay. We know the fiscus is in a significant challenging position, and it would be challenging.
But should the shareholder impress upon yourselves the need to move on that 0%, would you be willing to engage in those sort of talks?
Look, we will have to engage and discuss the pros and the cons at the end of the day. The previous question was specifically on your pricing. It means suddenly it impacts your pricing as well. Any additional cost. We're at a state now where we said, if it doesn't keep the aircraft in the air, and it isn't a cost for regulatory compliance, we don't want to incur it in SAA. So we created a war room where my staff is actually sitting and going through line by line by line to make sure all previous excesses that we just take it off the table.
And Dion, I suppose the point is we want to create a sustainable airline for the future.
We need to create a sustainable base to continue operating.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Procurement, how much do you save from that?
Last year there was a saving of around about 600 million. Not as fast as I would like, but you know there's processes that we need to go through and we need to get approvals, and that's part of the process that we're trying to accelerate.
I just wanted some clarity on the employees that are not 0% increases. Which part of the employees are those?
As Martin has indicated, it was the pilots, but we were forced to pay the pilots. And we also had a discussion with them and say, but we can't, we're not paying the other members of staff. Please forego this, let's defer it. They gave us a proposal, but the proposal was also unacceptable because it would have just added cost. And as Martin indicated, in AirChef specifically, there's a different industry body that determined the increases. And even there we deferred till September, and we asked for deferral again, and they said, no, you can't get it. So we've tried as far as possible to make sure that we continue to see what we can do. But as we say, without the required funding, it would be very difficult.
Okay, literally just a couple more minutes. So please.
What do you say, Dion, as I understand the cost structure in terms of labor costs and fuel costs, but what do you say to someone who's going to say SAA is not plugging the holes where the money is being played? Someone mentioned corruption and state capture. Perhaps that's where SAA should really be focusing on, because downsizing the company and putting people out of work it's not really going to save you any money that's going to have to operate in the airline.
Yeah, I know, agree. And there's various processes and investigations, as I said, that's currently on the go. And I believe there's probably more. If there's more, we would like those people to come through. We have created, as I said, a war room. Give us those areas so that we investigate and address as well. And then we're dependent on the WARCs and the NPNAs to assist us as well, and the SIU to assist us ultimately.
Okay, final two questions. I want to be fair because some people ask more questions than others. Hang on, back at TNW.
Okay, so in the case of industrial action, should we be aware of any operational sort of...
Yeah, we have a full contingency plan. However, if everyone strike, then it would be difficult to operate. If that happens, it will place the company, as we've indicated in our release, at significant risk. It may even lead to closure of the company. Because ultimately, suppliers will look at this and say, but should I still continue to provide service? And that's why we're requesting the unions that let's see how we can move forward. It's difficult times. What we can't give you now, can we give it to you? And 2, 3 years' time. There's various ways we can address this, and we all need to be open to it.
Yeah, and I think it's
I
fair to...
just really have a really pressing question. We're the media, but a lot of people that are working for SAA out there are probably hearing this for the first time. There's confusion regarding the unions, how they didn't hear. Can you reassure your staff through us that you want them to continue? I mean, the morale must be extremely low. I mean, going forward now, it's gonna be hectic for them because the morale is gonna be very low. So maybe give us something to tell them.
Look, I think there's a couple of things. We actually went to see the lenders. Let me share this with you. Because the lenders also want to see is there progress. Philip took them through a presentation and they were very impressed because it's previously when we went to the lenders, we say we were going to do this. This time we could illustrate this is already happening. And the same as I said on the technical side as well. The unfortunate thing about the turnaround now is the economic environment that we find ourselves. If this was a growth market, we will probably have a different discussion. But it isn't. This is unfortunately the cards that we've been dealt, and we need to see how best we can play it. We will definitely go out of our way to see how we can assist our employees, but also be there for them and make sure that we communicate on a regular basis to keep them informed. And I would thank you as well, because unfortunately in some of the newspapers there's very negative news always. We're not saying you mustn't report. We ask just a balanced report. But unfortunately, every time you report negatively, it negatively impacts our sales.
Great. Well, we'd like to thank you all for attending. I think it's just worth saying as well in summary relating to your question that in Dion's statement, we did stress very much about how our people are at the heart of this. We recognise how difficult the process is, but our objective is in these difficult times to create a brighter future for SAA and indeed the people of SAA. We promised, I don't know if it's ready as yet, but that we would give you a printout of the statement. Does anybody have a printout of the statement?
It will be emailed.
Okay.
It is ready, it will be emailed.
All right, so is that acceptable to you all? I think we have all of your email addresses, so we will email the statement to you so that you have it pretty much instantaneously, I believe. Is that okay with everybody?
Is it going up on your website?
Sorry, it's a question to our comms team. Is the statement going out on our website? Okay, so at the moment, I'm not going to make a promise I can't keep. We might decide at some stage that it's useful, but you'll get it long before it's on the website. That's the key point. I hope as well you feel that we've been fair in letting you ask as many questions as possible. And once again, on behalf of SAA, on what is a significant evening for us, we'd like to thank you for having come to see us so quickly. And we hope this has been helpful to you as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Zoek uw naam meneer.
Okay, Israel.